think it's on. Go ahead.
Hello, and welcome to part 4 of the Thought Leadership Series, Journey to the Cloud. My name is Michael Kent. I'm the CTO for RiverMeadow Software. I've spent most of my formative years in the migration space, data center migration, cloud migration, including many enterprises' journeys to the cloud. Today, we will be speaking about what to do once you've moved to the cloud and cloud management. And we're joined today by David Lucky, Director of Product Management with Rackspace. David, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. This is David Lucky, as you mentioned, and I'm the Director of Product Marketing at Rackspace. Rackspace is a next-generation managed service provider, and we have a whole host of services to help our companies accelerate and migrate to the cloud. And we're here today to talk to you about that. My role within that is I lead our public cloud management services offerings, and we're a trusted partner with a number of top companies around the world, and providing thought leadership around this idea of accelerating the value of the cloud, which is really our core focus. So today I wanted to talk to the team, to the folks here today about what do you do after you adopt the cloud? So in the 3 earlier webinars, you heard various phases of the cloud adoption journey. And I really like the phrase, the journey of adopting cloud. I've definitely seen that over the years working with our clients in adopting the public cloud. And it really is, I think, the journey is so apropos. And now we're talking about after you have adopted it, the journey doesn't stop then, and that's kind of the key, the whole wheel concept, if you will. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that, basically that last third of the wheel, which is around after you've adopted and migrated to the cloud, what are the additional responsibilities that you need to be aware of? And so today I'm going to highlight some of the things that we've seen with our customers on some of the challenges and how they face those challenges once they have migrated to the cloud, because the journey doesn't stop, and that's kind of a common theme you'll hear. So here today we're talking about some of those challenges. And once you do adopt the cloud, customers will ask, how do I secure my cloud? How do I get access to cloud experts? How do I control cloud costs and cloud sprawl within organizations? These are typical questions that happen not necessarily at the beginning of the cloud journey, but once a client has already migrated to the cloud. And then there's different ways that we combat that, and we can help clients do that. So we want to talk a little bit about that today. I'm going to move to the next slide. So this is kind of what I was starting to speak to. There's the day 1 and day 2 challenges that we look at with our customers, and these don't stop after the migration. There are continual cloud responsibilities and areas that companies need to focus in order to have a successful cloud experience. Some of the challenges that we see is after they have already deployed cloud services, there's some needs, and in particular, let's say patching. Do you have a patching strategy in place for the cloud? As it still is an issue, and from a security point of view or from new services. How do you upgrade? New container technology continues to be deployed. How do you keep up with that rate of innovation or rate of new services that are being deployed, particularly on the containers field? Security is not a once and done type of thing. Must continually be monitoring for secure practices and systems and methodologies, and I'll give some examples of that. You have a monitoring in place for issues to rapidly respond. That doesn't stop after day 1. That's something that continually needs to be done. Something we see very successful, and I'll show us examples, is performance monitoring. Are you monitoring your performance? If it's a customer-facing web application or whatever application you have, you need to have appropriate monitoring and statistics so you can manage that over time. Deployment automation. That is something, again, maybe you have an initial automation in place, but we find customers continually need to refine and update their automation in order to gain the efficiencies they look for from the cloud. Again, the whole reason of moving to the cloud was to gain that kind of agility and be able to accelerate the rate of innovation. So automation is a big piece of that, and you need to continually be looking at your automation strategies in the cloud. And then best practices. Are you utilizing the best practices? So the Azure and the other clouds all give good documentation around and sharing around what are the best practices in cloud deployment. So those are things that continually to take advantage of in day two as we look at that wheel, if you will. Moving on to the shared responsibility model is something that on the next slide is something that we often talk to our clients about. Obviously, the cloud infrastructure provider provides a number of components, but not everything is provided by the cloud infrastructure provider. This gives a sense of some of the types of activities that the platform will provide, but that customers then need to layer on top in order to have a successful cloud deployment and cloud strategy, whether that's troubleshooting issues, database management optimization is something we often help clients with because we see issues with keeping query functional and making sure things are optimized for speed and performance issues over time. Are you using the right instance sizes for your environment? These are kind of things that over time the cloud providers are continually enhancing. They're adding new size instances, and clients need to keep up with what are the latest instances. Are we right sizing our environment for the cloud and taking advantage of these new instances that the cloud provides? Again, monitoring and patching your VMs and system monitoring and reporting is something after day one that needs to be addressed. You have a strategy in place, but it needs to continually to be looked at. And there's different platforms to do that. The cloud providers provide their own monitoring platforms, but sometimes you want to enhance that to add application performance, not just infrastructure performance and things of that nature. So these are kind of things that we find clients continually evolve after day one is their monitoring profiles and things of that nature. And then also architectural and design guidance and best practices over time. Again, I mentioned earlier new services and after you complete a migration, there might be some new services that you want to take advantage of. And how do you utilize that in your specific environment? So there's a constant need for looking at future deployments as you move forward. Often we have clients where they've moved an initial application onto the cloud, and now they want to move future applications. Maybe they moved an ERP application or something of that nature. They then want to have a continual strategy of taking advantage of the cloud and on the agility that it provides. So it's just a main point here is that after day one, you want to continually accelerate the value of the cloud, making sure you're getting all the advantages of it that you can.
Seems like there's almost a new
of moving on to the next slide from that shared responsibility to just get a little specific on two areas in terms of ongoing cloud operations and governance. So moving on to the next slide is an example of that. One is patch management, which I mentioned earlier. There's various tools that can be layered on. What we often work with clients on is that they have a multi-cloud environment. It's good to have a patch management strategy that is consistent across all your environments, whether you have a dedicated environment, co-location, as well as the public cloud environment. It's a best way to manage this is to have a patch management solution that cuts across all your environments so that you make sure you're using the latest software patches across your platform. So, and then you can use different ways to do this from a smart perspective, using tagging to tag your instances for updating at various time intervals or custom patching it, and then you can do scheduled or on demand, and then reporting of those, so making sure you're keeping up to date with your patch management strategy.
So David, there seems like there's a couple of
interest is the billing management. A lot of customers I work with, when they initially move to the cloud, they're expecting savings as a component of their migration. But post-migration, they may not always find those savings that they were looking for. And there are tools to help and methodologies to put in place after day one to make sure that you are getting the savings that you were expecting out of the cloud. So what we recommend is to use advanced reporting and tagging and certain methodologies to ensure you have the right cost governance models in place in order to realize those cloud cost savings. In the case of having the right strategy and tools in place. So are you having the right size instances? That may be in there. I'm not hearing you, Michael. If you wanted to contribute anything on this, Michael?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So, David, when we're looking at this, I guess some of the questions that come to mind is, the one, it seems like there's almost a cloud version of Moore's Law, that this, every year that cloud is out, it moves faster and changes more. And it seems to me that this constant renewal and refresh model is really something that's important to take advantage of how fast the cloud is developing and the options that are being provided to the end customer. Is that kind of what you see in practice as well?
It really is. That's an excellent point. This whole idea of being able to refresh what you initially deployed is very important, I think. The tools, everything continues to improve over time as well. So you want to utilize the latest technologies, and then both from a tooling perspective as well as the cloud provider perspective.
And one of the things that we see in our practice as well, David, and I'd love your perspective on, is as companies begin to do this movement, they're a little gun shy when it comes to PCI compliance or some of these challenges. And I know that many of these cloud providers have blueprints that really talk about how to properly address PCI and case studies from large PCI deployments that kind of help customers understand that question you had really earlier on: am I doing this correctly, or am I doing this right? A lot of times, especially from an information technology perspective or what have you, understanding how those compliances overlay on a cloud, you just need some help. And we found that having someone, kind of the lifeline, if you will, to be able to reach out to say, look, we want to do this PCI compliance. We want to do it in a cloud native way. What do we have to be concerned with? How do I translate some of my compliance requirements to the cloud? And how do I monitor and measure those all in this kind of cohesive, continual improvement cycle? Is that something that you run across a lot in your practice as well?
Yes, that's an excellent point. I'm glad you brought that up. I saw a lot early on, particularly with cloud deployments around, like you mentioned earlier, around, let's say, PCI compliance. Customers were traditionally more comfortable with gear that they could comply with in terms of the controls that were required on a dedicated environment. But over time, more and more of our customers have gotten comfortable with the PCI in the public cloud. The public cloud providers have all the necessary platform requirements fulfilled, all the physical controls, and companies now have blueprints, like you mentioned, to be able to layer in the logical controls that are required to meet PCI requirements. So that is definitely a curve that we've seen companies get comfortable with now, whether it's PCI or HIPAA or various other GPDR and different requirements meeting those. PCI in particular is one that we've definitely seen. So that's an excellent point. And then, like the last part of that is around the monitoring of that to make sure you remain in compliance. So that's kind of like what we were talking about with day two. You need to continue to have your strategy in place to maintain your compliance and verify that over time.
Sure. Great, thank you.
That kind of leads into some best practices that we've seen over time as we've worked with customers to migrate into the cloud, is putting in place a successful ongoing cloud governance model. By this, I mean reporting structure intended to have periodic and some discipline around checking your cloud health, your cloud health status, if you will. Some cadences that we've seen work with customers is shown up here as an example. reviewing the tickets that have been created, what incidents have happened in the past week, what alerts. Something that we work with our clients a lot on are the cloud can generate a lot of alerts, right? A lot of them aren't required, aren't high importance. So working over time to make sure you've got those filters in place so that you can focus on those alerts that are most important. And that's the kind of thing that, day one you may have thought you've come up with a good filtering strategy around that, but I think we find it takes constant refinement around that. So you want to make sure.
And I think that is another one of those situations where we talk about the approach being kind of sprint-based. Start small, start low risk, get something out in the cloud and reassess, because I think it can be overwhelming. Once you actually have to walk a mile in those shoes, it seems that there's always something you come over with. We really ought to look at this technology or adjust our monitoring, our automation this way. I think there's a lot to try to consider and think of ahead of the cloud planning, but I think there's nothing quite like putting something out there and having to run it in that environment to really answer, did I get it right? Do I have something I can work with? What enhancements are needed, et cetera?
Exactly right. I mean, you want to do that upfront work as best you can and plan that, like you said, Mike. But over time, I think you need to continually kind of revisit that to make sure you have everything in place.
Yeah.
And this kind of goes through that, and that we, in some cases, you want to look at a monthly basis, looking at your SLAs, whether those are internal. Let's say your IT team has an internal SLA to other internal groups, or whether that's the SLAs with the cloud providers or your partner. These are the kind of things you want to make sure you're monitoring on a periodic basis and coming back to. And also, of course, customer satisfaction. What other measurements do you have if you're running a web application on the cloud? Are you meeting customer satisfaction with regards to response times or whatever is important to you in terms of your business? These are kind of things you want to review, and then moving up from there quarterly and annually. You just want to make sure that you're establishing some KPIs, and then those ongoing reporting will match to that.
Perfect.
So we find, these are kind of the main pillars of things that we hear from our customers that are challenges, as they adopt the cloud. The first one is fairly obvious: talent, breadth, and depth. Keeping a talent pool for our customers on the cloud technologies is a real challenge. They're in high demand, folks with the right certifications and so forth. It's hard to retain that cloud talent and their needed skill sets. So organizations can often struggle with high-skilled, scalable cloud talent pools. So that's something you want to keep in mind as you move forward, that you continue to need that. So that's one issue. Another thing to look at is, we kind of mentioned before, is out-of-control costs. And a good governance model is needed, both from the cloud is very elastic in nature, so it can grow. So do you put the right limits in place? Do you have the right governance model to keep that? And then also, controlling costs from a price point is critical when running these cloud environments. And then do you have the tools in place to help you manage that going forward? You're using the right instance sizes and things of that nature to help you control those kind of cost elements. And then we talked a little, Mike, we just talked earlier about security, and security in the cloud is different, and it does change rapidly. Cloud providers are adding additional controls and tools, and you want to make sure you're leveraging those. So you want to keep track of the latest challenges and exploits, and make sure that you have the skill sets to manage that cloud securely. That's a continual, that's not something that's one and done, as we mentioned.
Yeah, I think a lot of people factor the first two. What's my talent, breadth, and depth? And even in that, you can have developers that are very current on DevOps cycles, et cetera, but have operations teams that are not. So it can be spotty. You can have hot spots, I guess, if you will. And then everyone, of course, has the FUD, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt around cost control. And every cloud has a way to manage that if you look for it and if that's part of your plan going in. I think what we see that often surprises folks is, although they have security concerns, they don't really. It's hard to quantify, right? What exactly is it that I'm worried about? Is it exposure? Is it how are these connected systems going to have access to other systems, et cetera? And then ultimately, with so many cloud services available and out there and changing so rapidly, things can get very complex very quickly without kind of good guidance and good strategy as you move to the cloud. I think it's often a misconception that because you're moving to the cloud, you have to adopt all of these technologies. And I think what we have found in practice and over the last 5 years is really it's a sliding scale. You can move at your own pace, still get some value out of this cloud concept, this dynamic nature, especially if you move at the right pace that is right for your business, your company, and where you are in the market.
Absolutely agree. And each customer has a unique, has their own place in that cloud journey and what they can take on, and need to have a plan up front in order to do that. So that makes a lot of sense, and that's very similar to what we're seeing working with our clients over the past several years. So I think that kind of leads well into our next slide, and what we found is in a successful cloud strategy, choosing the right partner to help you along that cloud journey is a critical path item, whether that's technical providers or consulting providers, et cetera. They can help accelerate a company's successful journey with the cloud. And as we mentioned throughout this presentation, that it's help on the migration front, but then also assistance as you move forward with the cloud to make sure you're getting the latest out of it. So the way we look at it is along these four main functional areas where partners can help you better navigate your cloud journey and accelerate your use of the right services. We provide unbiased guidance and opinionated points of view in order to help you do that, because a partner might have come across similar problems with other customers and be able to share that kind of guidance with you, which I think is important, and not have to reinvent the wheel, so to speak. And that can help make things faster and help companies retire their technical debt by doing so.
Yeah, it's interesting too. I think that one of the things to consider as you move to the cloud, right, and something that we're seeing is that there are certain clouds that have a specialty in the technology stack, right? Especially where it comes into retiring that technical debt, right? So if your concern is Windows 2008 and it's coming end of life, there are programs inside of Azure that can help you retire some of that technical debt and take away some of the compliance concerns, some of the concerns around the security and veracity of 2008 as you execute on either other parts of your stack, technical debt, retirement, what have you, or innovate, right, as you mentioned. So there are some programs, I think, that as you're looking at this management in the cloud to take advantage of some of these cloud native capabilities and offerings that some of these cloud providers have that really will help you. It's a big nut to crack. And so if you're taking small bites, it might be an easy way to adopt some technology that allows you to allay the fears on one section while you focus on another and still stay in compliance and get support, et cetera.
100% agree. Yep. And that's, like you said, starting out on that journey, each customer is unique, so they need to keep that in mind. And then finally, working with clients, we often see that they may have public cloud for some applications, but they need to think about holistically managing their environments across all their environments.
Yeah, absolutely.
A couple example here, case studies. Don't have a lot of time, but I'll cover a couple of these just for some examples of some challenges that we've seen with our customers, as these are pretty common use cases. Wyndham, I'll start with a hotel chain. They own and have acquired a lot of properties. So they have something like, 40 some odd different hotel chains, and they've acquired so many companies over time that they have to migrate applications. So they had to come up with a key strategy of a single platform, and then over time migrating their various acquisitions, which is an ongoing matter. Again, after day one, they may have come up with a platform and a strategy, but they need to continually to execute on that after the initial migration to meet each hotel chain's customer experience and make sure that they're meeting the cost savings that they had projected as part of acquisitions and so forth. So it's an example of changing needs as you acquire additional properties and add to your cloud platforms. And,
okay, well, I think with that, we want to open it up for just for anyone that is actually online and wants to ask any questions. We'll give a couple minutes for folks to register those questions.
Great. Yeah, please do.
So one of the questions I saw was, what about cloud management platforms? And are there key features and capabilities that someone would need to look for in a cloud management platform to help manage across all these different environments? Any guidance?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a key consideration, particularly for companies that envision using multiple clouds. They want to have a cloud management platform that can span across clouds so that they're not having, two trouble ticketing systems, two monitoring platforms, to have an integrated view, whether that includes provisioning or not. We've had different customers look at that. And it's something that we work with Gartner, analyst firm, and looking at what are the capabilities and features that are important from a CMP perspective. And there's a number of things, and that's a whole topic in and of itself, really. But yeah, the whole multi-cloud aspect to it, I think, is more and more coming out, so that you can manage across platforms on a consistent basis, and have visibility across, for cost management. You don't want to be having multiple cost tools and things of that nature. So those are the kind of things that we definitely see clients more and more gravitating to as we go through this. We're going through a journey ourselves here, right? So.
Yeah. Well, David, I want to thank you very much for your time. We're at the bottom of the hour, and we'll go ahead and close it off. Thank you for your input. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both for your presentation today. We really appreciate the partnership, and really want to thank RiverMeadow for taking the opportunity over the past month to carefully curate these 4 unique episodes and to host that in this environment. And these episodes are recorded, as was mentioned before, and will be available on demand within Microsoft Partner Community. Thank you all for joining. We appreciate your time. Again, this is Keisha Jackson from Microsoft, the business strategy lead for Microsoft Partner Community. And we just appreciate all of you joining and the opportunity to learn and grow and to continue the partnership. So thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you, Keisha.
Great.
Thanks, Sandra.
Thank you. Bye.